Okay, Mr. Chair, we are at 10 o'clock. I'm starting the live stream.
Let me know when we're live.
Okay, we are live whenever you're ready.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Clerk. Welcome everyone to this special meeting of the Prince Edward County Affordable Housing Corporation. We have basically one item on the agenda, and we're very pleased to have Anny Lee, if I'm pronouncing it correctly, yes, member representative from the Senior Manager Client Relations, Multi-Unit Housing, Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation. So very pleased to have you here, Anny. Thank you for driving down here in this wonderful weather. So we do have one member that's not present. He has a welcome everyone to this special meeting of the Prince Edward County Affordable Housing Corporation. We have basically one item on the agenda, and I do. I sound marvelous. Lee, if I'm pronouncing it correctly, yes. Member representative from the Senior Manager.
My apologies, Mr. Chair. A bit of a lag in the camera feed.
Okay. All right, so I will not start all over again, other than to say thank you everyone for attending. And for Annie's benefit, as I was saying, one of our members is away due to a specialist medical appointment, but this is our board. Because this is a regular or a special meeting, we will follow the agenda. So we'll start first with a confirmation of the agenda. If I could get a mover and seconder to confirm the agenda, please. Crystal and Brad, if you could read that, please, Crystal.
That the agenda for the special Prince Edward County Affordable Housing Corporation Board meeting of May 22nd, 2025 be confirmed.
Okay. All in favor? That is carried. Does anyone have anything they wish to declare regarding a pecuniary interest? Seeing none, then we have no announcements, and we will jump right into the presentation at 5.1. And I'm assuming the clerk has your slide deck all ready to go. I know there was a kind of a late last night, minor tweak to a couple of the panels there, but I'm sure it didn't appear to me to be anything major. So welcome, Anny. And I don't know if it would be helpful, but our council members obviously have nameplates in front of them, but our lone member from the public that is here is Crystal Landstra.
Just imagine that one is in front of me, but we don't.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's right.
Oh yes, mix and match nameplates.
Thanks, Ben.
Okay, so if you're ready, Anny, the floor is yours.
Great.
We're looking forward to learning more about the CMHC and how you can help us to achieve our goals here in Prince Edward County.
Yes, great. Thank you very much. So I did bring my notes, so I will refer to my notes just to keep myself honest. I tend to, try share more than I need to sometimes. So thank you very much for your time today. I am here to share with you some details on our direct lending programs, notably our Affordable Housing Fund, so AHF, and our Apartment Construction Loan Program, so ACLP. We love our acronyms. And also to demonstrate our application review process and how we look at the different data points. Okay, so hopefully that will help, and then afterwards we can have a meaningful discussion about what that means for your specific projects. So I'll start with the National Housing, so this is the agenda. So talk about the National Housing Strategy, talk about the Affordable Housing Fund, then talk about the Apartment Construction Loan Program, and then talk about how we look at different housing market information. I'll show you some print screens of our housing market information portal, and we'll talk a little bit about the different ways we slice and dice the data, and then I'll open it up for some discussion. So starting with the National Housing Strategy. So this is I'm going the wrong way, sorry. This is a 10-year plan that was launched in 2018. Since 2018 and up until December 31st, 2024, we have committed $37 billion through federal NHS initiatives, National Housing Strategy initiatives, to support the creation, repair, and acquisition of over 308,000 units, and approximately 296,000 of those units are currently under construction or have been repaired and built. To give you a little bit of context of what this means for Ontario, approximately 45% of that investment of $37 billion is for Ontario specific. I pulled some data, and I can definitely pull data specific to certain markets, but everyone thinks, oh my gosh, Toronto gets all of the money, right? So I did some data. It's really a 50-50 split. Obviously, Toronto is a greater population, but 50% of our investments in Ontario are for cities outside of Toronto. In particular, I pulled some data for Belleville and the Belleville surrounding areas. We have invested almost $100 million for projects in the Belleville area, which includes 8 affordable housing fund projects, 1 apartment construction loan program project, and 1 federal lands disposition project. I have the list, and I can validate with whether I can share it publicly, because obviously these are all agreements with specific proponents, but you might probably be aware of some of these projects. So our programs across the National Housing Strategy, just to show you this visual, covers housing needs across the continuum. So we're looking at homelessness through to shelters, transitional and supportive housing, to community and affordable housing, all the way to market housing. And all of these programs are actually administered through different parties. So it's not just CMHC. We work with other federal departments as well as provinces and municipalities to be able to deliver these programs. And because of that, and that's why I'm here to help clarify this, there's different qualifying criteria for each of these programs, different ways that we look at affordability, and different ways that we actually underwrite the files. All right. So let's start with the Affordable Housing Fund. This is our flagship program. It was launched in 2018 with a budget of $14 billion over 11 years through to 2028. Up until the end of December 2024, we have committed almost $11 billion of that budget to support the creation of over 41,000 new units and the repair renewal of over 169,000 units. The intent of the Affordable Housing Fund is to attract partnerships and investments, because we know we as the federal government, we cannot do it alone. So the goal is also to incentivize new construction of new affordable units. We did make some updates to the program back in November, and we created 2 substreams. So the first substream is called the Community Housing Substream, and the second substream is called the Rapid Housing Substream. So I'll provide a little bit more clarity in the following slides. So the Community Housing Substream is more or less the same as the previous Affordable Housing Fund. We're really looking at the creation of new affordable units, which is a combination of repayable loan and contribution funding. So we call that forgivable loan. We're looking here at a debt coverage ratio of these projects to more or less break even. So we're looking at a DCR of 1.0. We also launched what we call the Rapid Housing Substream. So this is in particular targeting the most vulnerable population. So we're looking at projects for supportive transitional housing or shelters that are looking for contribution-only funding to be able to really get their project moving forward. And so we for these specific projects, we do allow up to 100% of funding using CMHC contribution. Something else I wanted to point out, so there's 2 things I want to talk about. Before I talk about the affordability requirement for the Affordable Housing Fund, AHF, I do want to point out we also updated our energy efficiency standards and our accessibility standards in November. Energy efficiency standards were upgraded from 2017 standards to 2020 standards, and the accessibility standards were updated. I won't rhyme out the numbers, but essentially the point of it is to update the standards to meet the current local building standards or provincial building standards. What that means is that there's definitely projects in the pipeline, I would say, or under works using the old standards. And for some of these projects, it's quite cost prohibitive to actually make these changes now to adhere to the new standards. So what we've offered for affordable housing projects through the AHF program is we call it a transition period. So proponents have up until the end of September 30th, to submit an application, a full application, complete with no changes, using the old standards, and we'll accept it. Okay. Anyone else submitting after September 30th, 2025 must adhere to the new standards. And so that's our way of helping, making, reducing the cost burden for projects that actually have to go back to design and redesign some of the units, especially with the accessibility requirements where they've expanded, the turning circles, they've expanded, the widths and the sizes of the spaces of the rooms, which could really impact the number of units that a project could offer. On the affordability side, we are looking at, so this is interesting. So there's 3 phases I'll talk about as it relates to our application process, and I'll talk a bit more later on. But here I'm talking about the minimum requirements for program, was launched in 2017. It has a budget of almost $55 billion over 15 years. So this one lasts longer than the AHF program. It goes on until 2031. The intent of this is to provide low-cost loans to build rental apartment projects across Canada. As of the end of December, we have committed almost $22 billion of the $55 billion in loans to support the creation of over 56,000 units across Canada. So this in particular looks at providing lower cost construction loans during the riskiest phases of a development, which is during construction up until stabilized operations. And the benefit of the ACLP program is that it also comes with mortgage loan insurance. So that means that developers at the end of the term can convert it to an MLI file, which also allows them the benefit of having lower rates with a standard conventional lender at that point. As it relates to the social outcome requirements, so the affordability criteria, for this one it's different. Here we're looking further over along the continuum where we look at the market housing and the affordable housing part of that visual. And so the affordability criteria is different than the AHF programs. And instead here of looking at median market rent, they're looking at income. So we're looking at a minimum of the 20% of the units must be affordable with rents at or below 30% of the median total income of all families in the subject market. So that language comes direct from StatsCan. We're taking the median total income of all families because they segment it by types of households. And so we're just taking the total. And that's the minimum requirement. However, we do allow projects to partner with other levels of government following their affordability criteria. So we're not going to say that we're going to be more strict, or we're not going to force proponents to change their rental definition, the affordability definition, if they're already adhering to another level of government. So we call this criteria B. So criteria B is where they would, if a municipality, for example, has a program where they offer, tax incentives for a specific affordability criteria, we'll allow that, and we won't question that, right? So that's the ACLP program, and so we typically see rent levels actually higher than the AHF program, just because of the demographics that it's seeking to benefit. Similarly to AHF, we also made some enhancements to the ACLP program in November. We expanded eligibility to include not just municipalities, but also provinces and territories. We've also included post-secondary educational institutions because we've offered additional housing types. We now include student housing and independent living as eligible housing types for the ACLP program. As well, this is the part that's interesting, is we've launched a dual scorecard. So similar in nature when I talk about, the dance floor and dancing partners, right? We start with a social outcome scorecard. There's a lot of information in front of you, but this is various criteria that we look at where you can get points from 0 to 100. 100 is the most number of points that you can get to be able to see if you can get onto the dance floor, right? So this is the eligibility. So when we do so the eligibility, is what I talked about earlier about the median total income. Here is where we're talking about prioritization, okay? So this is the next step. So you got onto the dance floor by making sure that 20% of your units meet the affordability, 30% of the units meet I apologize, I'm speaking. So 20% of the units meet 30%. I have to make sure I read it directly because it can get confusing. So I understand. So 20% meeting 30% of income is getting you onto the dance floor, or you're using one of our another level of government's affordability criteria. Next is whether we choose to dance with you, right? Whether you're an eligible dance partner, is the social outcome scorecard. So this is where we prioritize all the applications against each other based on how much they give back to us as it relates to social outcomes. So we're not just looking at affordability, we're also looking at accessibility, we're also looking at energy efficiency, we're also looking at community and transit orientation. So, everyone's talked about the 15-minute walking neighborhood. So what else do you have in that neighborhood that provides that community experience, as well as foster collaboration? Is the project partnering with other nonprofits perhaps, or other levels of government, as I mentioned earlier, and target populations. So we do allow additional points if it is an independent living project, student housing, or if it's family oriented. So 35% or more of units are 2 or 3 bedrooms or more. Right? And so again, the conversation isn't just about affordability, but really looking at the project at whole. And some of our prioritization discussions really, digs deep into, is this the best project in this specific neighborhood in comparison to all the other projects we're looking at across Canada? Okay. So once you've passed the prioritization part and you've made it through with the social outcome score, and again, like I said, the max is 100. We're probably looking at 50 to 60 as a score that is competitive. And again, like I said, we would look at all of these applications side by side and have these discussions of which one would be prioritized higher than the other. Next, once you get through prioritization, then we get to this lending flexibility scorecard. So that's new. We never had that before. This is where we talk about favorable loan terms. So would this project be eligible for a 20-year term instead of a 10-year term? Would this project be eligible for higher LTCs, the loan to cost? So will we offer 95% instead of 90% as loan to cost, right? So these are all part of the negotiation once you make it past the social outcomes score card. And so in this specific one, there is something called the market adjustment score. And I think this is what was in the communication that we received. So just to provide clarity on what the market adjustment score is for, this is only used at this portion when we're talking about the loan terms for the project. So this is used for projects located in markets with very high market rents and relatively low median total income. So there's a bit of a gap, right, in order to be able to achieve the affordability outcomes. So in order to support projects and having an equal opportunity to qualify for the lending flexibilities, we offer the market adjustment score. So yes, Prince Edward County is not on the list. However, because of its proximity to Belleville, we would allow Belleville as the option in the drop down, and in that case, there's a 9-point score that would be added. 9 points will be added to a project in the Prince Edward County area. So hopefully that helps to provide a bit more information on the applications. So now I'm going to get into the housing market information. For each of the programs that I discussed above, there are multiple data points, right? So the first point here on the slide talks about median market rent data. This is for the Affordable Housing Fund, right? And I'll talk about how we can toggle the data in the next slides. The second data source that we use are the income tables published by Stats Canada, and this will be for the ACLP program, looking at the median total income for all families. And then lastly, we also allow the affordability definition from another level of government. Again, for the ACLP program, for criteria B, we don't question it. We would just follow whatever the municipality has mandated as the affordability criteria. For rural markets, as you can understand, rural markets for us would be those that are with a population of less than 10,000 in the population. And obviously it is more difficult to get data in rural markets, so we do look at pooled provincial data for zones outside of census metropolitan areas or census areas, and we can look at subzone level MMRs as well, where there are strong supporting rationale. and this is something we can discuss afterwards as well. We have worked with municipalities on their specific data points as well as use appraisal reports to be able to substantiate what rents could be at, as well as market feasibility studies. So these are all other data points and professional services that we can consider when we're looking at the information. The question that's important to figure out is, at what point do we use this information? And that's what I'll go through when I go through the application process. But first, let me show you what the Housing Market Information Portal provides. This is where we're looking for median market data. We also have average market data as well. So Prince Edward County is there as the city, and you can see the map of the region that it covers. When we look at the actual rents, you'll see that, yes, it is quite low as it relates to the 1-bedroom and 2-bedroom rents. What's interesting is, and that's something I can show you, like I can do a demo, but you can toggle for the construction year. So how old are the properties that we're looking at? And no surprise, you'll see right there at the bottom of the slide in front of you, the rents that we are getting from a rental market survey are for properties that were built prior to 1960. So it's older stock. So probably makes sense, right? So let's look at Belleville. So Belleville, there's a bit more data for Belleville. And again, like I mentioned, because of its proximity to PEC, that's something that we could consider. So when we look at Belleville itself, you'll see that the rents are higher for the 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom. But when I toggle for construction year, you'll see that those that were constructed 2000 or later have a higher rent at 22,000, right? As opposed to what we were looking at prior, which was about the 1,000 mark. So it's a pretty sizable change. And this is what I mean by, depending on each of the projects that you have, we are willing to look at what's comparable, what makes sense based on the project itself and what the comparables are in the area. And we typically, obviously for new construction, we want to look at properties that were built in 2000 or later, right? With that said, I just want to explain to you how we get the data through our rental market surveys. So this is a survey that we do on an annual basis in October. What we do is we look at properties with at least 3 rental units that have been on the market for at least 3 months. So we're looking at tenanted units. So we do not look at rents that for properties that are new construction and not either vacant or just recently tenanted, right? So that way we have, it's comparable in terms of the data set. And we also look at various data points. We look at the rents, vacancy rates, we look at, the expenses, any trends, market trends as well. So we do get a lot of data. We survey each of the property owners directly, or the manager of the building, or the rental project, or the building superintendent. So we're looking at actual data. We do this on an annual basis, mostly because a lot of this data doesn't fluctuate too much within a 12-month period. So we find that doing it once, we used to do it twice a year, but now we only do it twice a year. Oh, sorry, we used to do it twice a year, now we only do it once a year. So with that said, I wanted to show this visual with you as the 3-part process by which we assess projects. So the first part here is meeting the minimum program requirements. That's what I mean by, getting onto the dance floor, right? So making sure that you meet the minimum requirements. But that doesn't necessarily mean that this project becomes a successful project, because there's other steps that happen. So just meeting the requirements gets you in the door. Then we look at the prioritization process. So both our Affordable Housing Fund and the Apartment Construction Loan Program are very competitive. There's a lot of interest, and it's across Canada, right? We know that housing is a high need across many markets across Canada. So we have the unfortunate problem of having to prioritize which files provide the greatest social outcomes, for that particular need. So that's where I talk about, deeper affordability might make it through. So everyone might meet the minimum requirements, but what would stand out is a file that has deeper affordability, exceeding what our minimum requirements are. Having more partnerships with nonprofits, having, more relationships in terms of, working with the municipalities, working with the municipalities' wait list, for example, helping with a specific target population. So target vulnerable populations that are important to us would be, women fleeing violence, persons with disabilities, Indigenous communities. So there's definitely specific populations that, help to increase the prioritization opportunity for a specific file. So that gets you through prioritization. But even though you get through prioritization, doesn't mean that we get to loan agreement, right? So then we get into underwriting. Once we get into underwriting, we're looking at the financial viability of the project. So here we're looking at everything. The borrower, are they able to finish the project? Are they able to maintain the project? What's the construction experience? Are the rents the market rents that are being proposed, is that even viable? So we've been talking about affordability before that, but then we got to look at the market rents, and we actually calculate a market rent dollar per square foot to find out, is it actually comparable for what the market itself can absorb? What is the vacancy rate for that specific market for a 2-bedroom market rental, 1-bedroom market rental? And so we do a lot more of a deeper dive of the pro forma to figure out whether or not it is feasible. And then we look at the debt coverage ratio to see, okay, well, if we've adjusted all of these different line items in the grid, what does the debt coverage ratio look like, and is there a gap in funding? And sometimes there is, unfortunately. And at that point, this is where, when we get into underwriting, this is where we look at appraisal reports, we look at market feasibility studies, we confer with these other professional reports to ascertain whether or not this is a project that will be successful in the long term, right? We want to make sure that we're investing in projects that will be there forever, more or less, right? So these are the 3 things that of different areas and ways that we look at rents, and different data points to be able to come to a decision of whether or not a specific file we will commit to signing a loan agreement with, whether or not we'll issue a loan agreement, and what our final loan offer would be. So between part 1 to part 3, this could take 6 months to a year, right? And throughout this period, there could be fluctuations, both in the market information, because things could change in the market, and also our loan offer, right? So that could fluctuate as well. As we all know, interest rates fluctuate. As we all know, the economic environment fluctuates. So from what the application was submitted on day 1 to what the loan agreement says, oftentimes it is different, just by the nature of what the process is. So that, in conclusion, and I'm almost right on time, hopefully, provides a good overview of the programs, about how we look at different types of rents, and then how we assess an application. I provided a bit more information in the slide deck. I guess everyone can get a copy of it, so you have the information. But at this point, I'll open it up for any questions or discussion.
Okay. Thank you. I really wasn't going to be putting a time limit on you. So, because I think, as I mentioned earlier, we truly want this to be an open conversation, as opposed to a typical presentation and putting you on the spot. So anyway, so at this point, I will open the floor up to questions. Councillor Nyman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for that presentation there. So I'm trying to understand a bit, but if you go to page 24 of the report, you had the rent there for Prince Edward County comparable to Belleville and Quinte West, and you had like $1,300 for a 2-bedroom. So I did some asking around, and right now a 3-bedroom is $2,500. A 2-bedroom is probably $2,000 or more. So I'm just wondering where you got the information, because the reality is that that's not what people are paying here. They're being asked, and landlords are getting that amount of money because people need to live. So I'm just want to, I guess, for myself, is understand where those numbers came from, because the reality is rent's a lot higher.
Yeah, no, agreed. So here for Prince, that's what I was trying to get at with this particular slide, with this data set. The data that we're getting it from are from properties built prior to 1960 and 1960. So older stock, right? Which understandably would have lower rents, usually because they're not your shiny new unit. So that's the data that we're missing. So that's what I'm trying to share with you, is there is a data gap. There is an obvious data gap when you look at this, where we don't have enough data points to be able to publish. So where you see the 2 stars, it means that we do have some data, but we cannot publish it. It's not statistically reliable. So this is something where maybe we can have a follow-up conversation, and we can maybe, if you have data on, so we're looking at year of construction, we're looking at a property size. So we're looking at 3 stories or more, 4 stories or more. So a lot of our properties, I don't have it here, but I believe our universe of properties are based out of projects that have 6 units or more. So we're not looking at small rentals, we're not looking at 3-unit rentals or 2-unit rentals, so larger type projects. So that's, again, something that we need to be able to figure out based on your data and the characteristics of the buildings that they're in, and then we can figure out what makes sense. Yeah.
Okay, can I have
Yeah.
one more? Okay, thanks for that.
Yeah.
So, and I'm not sure if I understood you or not, but I think I did. But so, projects or rent is also some of that information that you're looking for is also the wages in the area, right? So if you have
Income, yeah.
yeah, so if you have like X number of units, or you want to build that, you got to have the wages or the income in that area. But here, and I'm just going to lay it out there,
Yep.
we have people who work 3 or 4 part-time jobs just to get the full-time wage because we don't have full-time wages here. So how do you calculate that into it?
We look at the StatsCan data and we would, I believe, look at Belleville, because I don't think Prince Edward County, I'll have to double check this, if there's specific data point for the median total income, but we would look at the total income for a specific city. And then for ACLP, that program it's specific, it'll be 20% of that income, and then divided by 12 for the monthly rent. Like, that's how we would do it. So for example, I apologize, I didn't look it up directly for Belleville, but I do have it off the top of my head for Ottawa. So if I take the median total income for the city of Ottawa from StatsCan, so it's however they do it. We don't dive into whether it's full-time, part-time, an aggregate, tips included or not. Like, we just take the median total income for all families. It's about, I think it's $90,000. Then you divide it by 12, it gets you about, I think it's $1,500 a month. So that would be the minimum requirement that's affordable for City of Ottawa. So you do the same thing for the City of Belleville, whichever that number is. So typically it's a higher number, I would say. And it's only 20% of the units. So 20%, of a 5-unit project is 1 unit, right? So it's not a large barrier. We find for the apartment construction loan program to be able to do this, most oftentimes developers and proponents, they put their 1-bedrooms, like the 1-bedrooms are already at that level, so they don't really have to do much, right, to qualify. Yeah, hopefully that makes sense. Okay.
I will add that we do have our own StatsCan employment data from the 2021 census. We are not lumped in with Belleville.
Okay.
And I think that may be a lot of the errors in the assumptions is including us with any other community. Our CMA is very much different than Belleville. And I will say,
like, do you have the number?
showing numbers where rents are higher in Belleville is just not true. It's just not accurate, I'm sorry. So,
No, for sure.
but I just wanted to get that out there.
It's just the data that we have, right? So
Yeah,
we're missing the data points for 2000 or later. That's what I'm trying to say. So if you have that, absolutely, we'll look at
And maybe that's something we can get into further in the discussion about how to ensure we have accurate data, or that you have accurate data that we can help with.
Yeah, absolutely.
Before I go to you, Kate, I believe, Alice, you wanted to...
Through the chair, I was just going to jump into the median household income for Prince Edward County is $82,000.
Okay, Kate?
Yeah, I wanted to sort of jump in at sort of where you jumped in, which is really good. I'm glad you made the point about Stats Canada, and this is why we're here having this conversation, is that the data points don't reflect reality. The data points that you have don't reflect the reality at all. And I'm interested in how you look at rural areas, because rural areas don't meet a lot of the same benchmarks for understanding a rental framework as, for example, a Belleville would, or any urban center. And we're not a satellite of Belleville on any level. And we have a very complete community with complete amenities here. I don't know how that would be captured based on the data that you are collecting. And it sounds like you base the information on rental units on a certain type of building only, but we have, in a rural area, and I think this would be reflected in many rural areas, we have a hidden community of renters that are severely disadvantaged because there are no units. So they rent rooms in families' basements, or they'll move to a much cheaper center and commute to their work and their life and their childcare here, but they have to move to Belleville, where it's significantly cheaper, or they have to move to Napanee or Deseronto, where it's seriously affordable, much more affordable, and then commute 40 minutes to access their childcare or access their families, or access, in one case that I know personally, there's a family living in sort of smaller units in 2 homes. And these are in private dwellings, so it's harder to access that data from a sort of macro perspective. However, that doesn't mean that the need isn't very acute. And there are also an awful lot of people who've had to leave the community, who've had to reside elsewhere, who want to move back to be close to their lives. And people in the community, the choice is, do you spend 80% of your income on a rental unit that can accommodate you and your children? Or do you live far away and spend a couple of hours commuting to your life? So I don't know how, when we do have those data points, when we do have what we believe is a fair collection of data points to clarify the struggles of Prince Edward County, and I think it would be shared by other rural, small urban areas, how do we ensure that picture gets painted adequately so that we can even be considered to get on the dance floor? Further to that, I would say, what if when we're looking at the criteria, which right now, the criteria that you keep and the data that you have, there's no way we will never, ever be able to access any of your programs. Even though the need is far greater than what we can see reflected in what you're presenting. And I appreciate that's what you have. I understand. But if we do find a way to ensure that the picture is more accurate of where this community is, I'm also interested in the breakdown of the criteria to be met for, and where is it? It was on, let me go back to the criteria to get onto the dance floor regarding affordability, depth, and breadth on page 15 of the agenda. So, looking at, for example, affordability depth, 15 to 30% of median income. If we, but for 20 to 30% of units, if we were able, is there enough flexibility in the program, in the programs that you offer, where if we were only able to achieve, say, 35% of median income, or 36 or 37% of median income, but we were able to extend that to 50 units. So a more, do you accommodate for that in some cases as,
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Yeah, absolutely. That's why we split it. So it's the number of units and also the depth. So we, instead of having, it used to be together, and so we split into 2 different metrics to allow for that flexibility of looking, maybe do I do more
so
units?
It wouldn't eclipse the full 12% offered. It would.
Yeah, we look at it separately.
Okay.
They're separate. That's why they're separate lines there.
But they're linked very closely.
Well, in terms of the performance,
Ultimately.
absolutely.
Yeah.
So to answer your question in terms of like how do we ensure the picture is accurate, I recognize the data is the data, and I told you there are limitations to the data we have as it shows in terms of the types of structures that we're looking at. What I would say is from a project-specific perspective is what we would look at. So the data that I'm sharing with you is just data. But what I'm trying to get, make sure that's clear is we're looking at the whole process, and this process looks at a project. So to get into this flow, we're looking at the building that you're looking to build. Like, what are you looking to build? Based upon that project, what is comparable? So it's hard for me to get into like numbers right now, but what I would want is to see, what are you looking to build? Where are you looking to build it? How many units are there? How many units are affordable? Who are you looking to serve as a vulnerable community? Like, who are you targeting? Dedicated units to women and their children, right? Family units. So what percentage of them are family size units to allow children to live in it comfortably, right? You're not squeezing everyone into a 1-bedroom apartment. So we look at the project itself, and then we determine, based upon that, what is reasonable. So I recently worked on a file for a rural market outside of Ottawa, like close, way out towards the 401, so far outside of the Ottawa city center. We got it moved forward because they had a market study. So they actually went out and paid a consultant to do a market feasibility study looking at what is the project that they're looking to build, where are they looking, and they pulled, the municipality's data and they put the data into it. So we were able to use that as a way to ascertain the viability of that specific project, right? And the people that the project itself is looking to serve.
So do we have to hire a consultant in order to do a market study like that when we've got staff who've done it?
Well, we can definitely look at that, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. So right now, a lot of the communications that we received are really kind of general. What I'd like to have, if we can, going forward, is to have a project-specific conversation. Talk to me about the project you're looking at building. Where is it going to be? Who is it looking to serve? And then we can have further conversations on that. Yeah.
Thank you for the presentation. Kind of feeding into that question. So it sounds like you're open to discussing individual projects, and I guess I'm just wondering, so it sounds like from a Prince Edward County perspective that those conversations would have to be one-off because we can't even get in the door with the way the applications are set up currently, which is, I think, part of the issue, is that we're not able to select anything specific to Prince Edward County. Anyone who's submitting an application is not finding any options that would allow us to accurately represent what our situation is here. So it sounds like the alternative is every project or any item that we have would be a case-by-case conversation with staff at CMHC?
We highly recommend applications to come through one of our team members, because our team members will sit down with the proponent, and we always do that. We have a minimum document checklist. We have our pro forma workbook, and we literally sit down with the proponent and we walk through it line by line to make sure that you have everything you need for a successful application. That's probably the best way of doing it to avoid any confusion, any miscommunication as well, and that helps to ease the process for sure. Every project is unique, like regardless, even if it's in a major city, it's still unique based on the people it's serving, based on its needs. I've had negotiations in terms of the repair estimate for a specific project based on the demographic. We have standard benchmarks, and the municipality pushback is like, no, my standard's higher based on my actuals because this is the demographic, this is the type of project, and this is what I need. Like we are open because every project, like I said, is unique based on what you're trying to achieve. So absolutely, we're here to help you project by project.
Okay, could I have one follow-up to that?
Sure.
I guess I just positioning from the perspective of, like you mentioned, some of the urban centers, maybe their data is already lined up well to be quite successful with those applications. So from their perspectives, they can move quicker using a process built for them, whereas we have to do that a bit differently. We have to do a pre-dance before we can get into the dance to see if any of our data can actually work. Yeah. Like it's quite a large process, which I guess, and you which is why you're here. You understand that we are having some issues. We're trying to communicate that. No. We totally understand where you're coming from. I guess that's just our side of it. Is there's a lot of dancing involved before we can even get to a point of any certainty, and by that point we've exhausted and used a lot of resources to get there. And so just looking for some way to maybe streamline that and maybe bring us a bit more even with those urban centers that are able to do it a bit easier. They actually have more resources, but can potentially fly through it where we can't.
Yeah, and I understand that's the perception that you have. I'll be honest, we want more rural projects. We have a target for more rural projects to be funded because we do have a higher proportion of urban. So we want to work with you. We want to help you and still help you understand. Just because it's an urban project doesn't mean it's faster. There's probably more vacancy rates right now that we're seeing in urban centers, especially at the higher market rents. And there's also absorption concerns, especially when there's a lot of rental market supply that's going out there right now. So there's a different conversation with some of these projects where some of them aren't actually going through. As I said, every project is unique, and we try as much as possible to provide that storyline of like, where is this? Why is this really important? Who's going to be living in it? To really get a sense of, is this a viable project?
Great.
Yeah.
And I guess, I think
Go
potentially.
ahead, and then
I was just
then
going to
we'll go to
defer.
Adam.
Yeah, to Adam. I think you maybe had something to add to the.
Go ahead, Adam.
Thank you,
Anny,
Mr. Chair.
Adam is our acting CAO
Director of Housing today.
and Director of Housing, yeah.
No, thank you. And I appreciate that we're having this conversation, Annie, and your presentations really added some context. But I wanted to make you aware, because I'm really heartened to hear that, you know, you're willing to work with us at the earlier stages. And then, you know, I've been accused of having 2 left feet when I dance. So at the risk of stepping on toes, my experience on one of our projects has not really necessarily been aligned with what you're telling me. So we do have a project that is a very small project on a piece of land that was given to the Housing Corporation by the county. It's a small 12-unit apartment building. This corporation's mandate is to provide maximum benefit in the affordable housing space to this community. So we're not looking for a mixed market situation. 12 units of affordable small units, you know, geared toward young working people in the county. It's got a great narrative, but we can't get anywhere near close to an application because you require cost estimates prepared by a cost estimator. And me as the one that's giving the advice to this corporation, the corporation that does not have a lot of liquidity, we are not able to move ahead with the project on the basis of a pro forma. Whether we use our own market data, makes it challenging, but using Belleville or Kingston, it still doesn't work out. We don't necessarily have the 25% to contribute through the AHF program. To make the pro forma work, but so I like to hear that, you know, you're willing to work with us, but we can't get to the stage where we are undertaking full architectural and detailed designs because I can't recommend to the board that we continue to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on detailed design when the pro forma doesn't anywhere near work, and we have no ability to generate millions of dollars to give as our component of the required contribution of the municipal side. So I mean, I agree we're all trying to get to the same place, and that's providing affordable housing, and we're really doubling down on that, but we don't have the resources to advance a project far enough to even apply on the basis of the application process that you currently have in place.
Did you reach out to our seed program at all for funding for?
Yeah, we did receive seed funding, and that's paid for some basic architectural design. But again, a small project, small site, 12 units doesn't have an economy of scale to really generate a lot of seed money. That funding went toward the conceptual architectural design and the environmental work. So, you know, the board is looking at potentially to advance the project to the point where we can confirm construction costs. So that I can advise whether or not we would ever have enough revenue to cover the loan program. We can't get to that point because I can't recommend that we spend another $200,000 on architectural services, not knowing whether we'll ever be successful with an application. So just to give you some context, we have projects, we have a very engaged board, we have this corporation that's working diligently, but we're running up against significant challenges with respect to actually accessing the funds to advance the projects. We have that part down. We know what our community needs. We have a housing needs assessment. We have market data that's collected on a regular basis. We just need, frankly, we just need money.
It's the capital gap.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's it. And this can't be. It's not a supportive or transitional housing at all. It's just affordable.
It's affordable based on our definitions.
Okay. No, the reason why, because if it could fit in the rapid housing stream, it would be a different flex there. But when we're looking at the community housing stream, it's a policy limit that if it's through a municipality or another level of government, the max we can provide is funding is 75%. That's the challenge you're up against, is that it?
Yeah, I just want to make sure we're talking to the microphone so the folks
Oh,
online
sorry,
can hear.
sorry,
But
yeah.
would you? So we've been operating under the assumption that the AHF would be the best for us because again, all affordability, the all the social outcomes we've plugged into the pro forma give us the points in terms of being near transit and all of those sorts of things. But I see we've spoken quite a bit about the ALCP program because the 25% that we have to come up with, the way the pro forma, the way the program seems to be structured, we're not able to generate excess revenue to pay for a different loan that would cover the 25%. There doesn't seem to be any wiggle room in the program for us to find a way to fund the other 25%. Like we don't have $2 million and the county doesn't have $2 million to put in the project and it can't move ahead. And partnerships seem unlikely with private sectors because it's only 12 units and even having half of them being market to make that private sector partnership work doesn't make any pro forma work either. So, does the ALCP program, would it work a little bit better or would it be able to provide 100% funding over like 50 years? Is there any context you could help with on
I
that?
have to look at your pro forma and then we can discuss that, but that's another thought as well, because we can go up to 95 or even 100 depending on the point system, right? Again, I have to look at what your capital stack would look like as well, right? Just to understand like where your flex is, and then because with ACLP, the affordability criteria is higher, right, than AHF. So you could hopefully get a higher net income. Do you know what I mean? And then hopefully, because the DCR is at 1.1, that's the only difference, versus AHF is 1.0. So you just got to make sure that you have a bit of cash flow, but you're hopefully looking at a higher rent, and then you can have more market rents as well. It's a balance. So we'd have to look at your pro forma closely.
Right, and I think again the mandate is to provide that affordable housing. But what we're seeing here is that our market datas are higher, which is makes a pro forma work from a construction perspective, but it doesn't really help with the real affordability problem that we have. So we're sort of solving a problem by going in the wrong direction with respect to affordability, and that's where we'd like we need you to be aware of that, so that with if and when these programs are reviewed, they can kind of take a look at our unique circumstances, because we would love to provide far deeper affordability here. We can't pat ourselves on the back for creating an apartment building that requires $2,000 a month for a one bedroom. That's not affordable. It's maybe affordable by definition, but it's not truly affordable in this community.
Right.
And then to add to that, I don't believe we're unique in Eastern Ontario in any or in any rural community. I have Brad and then Kate.
Yeah.
Thanks. So I just want to make sure that maybe I understand, I guess. So when we're putting in, if somebody puts in an application, so you're looking at this project, but with that project, so it's affordable housing, let's just say we're going to have all 12 units affordable.
Yep.
But you're also looking at how's it going to benefit the community, right? So this location, it's close to amenities, it's walking distance, there is transit and stuff like that, and it's close to green spaces and stuff like that. So I'm just trying to understand, if somebody's putting in an application, that stuff needs to be listed.
Yeah.
And so you get points for that.
Yeah.
Okay, so you made a point earlier about Belleville is included in the Prince Edward County, and we get 9 points added to that. So what's the 9 points for?
It's the lending flexibility. So it's not the social outcome score. I'm going to try to see if I'm going the right way. Apologize if I'm going the wrong. I'm going the right way. Okay, sorry. Okay, so it's not this one. This is the social outcome score where you talked about community-oriented, proximity to transit, proximity to childcare, proximity to schools, and the depth and breadth of affordability. That's all we look at here, right? The next is the loan terms. So the 9 points gives you more points to get to the different tiers. If you look on the screen there, you see tier 3, tier 2, tier 1. If you're able to get a tier 1, that's where we talk about 100% loan to cost, so no equity required, 50-year amortization, right? So lower loan payments, and you can also go up to a 20-year loan term, so security as it relates to your loan payments for a longer period of time. So that's the 9 points gets you there, and not necessarily in the previous side, which gets you prioritized, right? So once you're prioritized, then we can talk about, okay, what term, what amortization, what loan amount would work for you, right?
Okay. Thank you.
Kate?
I do have a different question, but could you expand on the criteria, those data point criteria and the connection to Belleville and how it applies here? Just a little bit more, because I'm still not quite understanding the rationale of the criteria built into some of the points that you're discussing here, and I'm still not connecting it to Belleville in my mind successfully.
It's just, I believe one of the written inquiries that we received was, we released this scorecard and it has this market adjustment score, and the ask was to add Prince Edward County to it.
That's just it. That's the entire, okay.
That was all of it is. And so all I'm trying to say is that we would give you 9 points for that. That's all.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you want to go to Alice before you come back to me for my original question? If that's...
Alice, was there something you wanted to include there?
Sorry.
Oh, sorry. I just wanted to circle back and see maybe that would offer some clarity right now. You mentioned in criteria B that CMHC would accept affordability definitions from lower levels of government.
Yeah, absolutely.
So in the case of Prince Edward County, we have a bylaw that offers property tax waiver for affordable housing based on an affordable definition, which is 80% below MMR for rental, based on our data.
Yep.
So if that's the case, then would you accept our data for
That's
criteria
exactly.
B?
We would just need a letter of confirmation from the city saying that, yes, this project meets our affordability definition. Like, we just need something in writing that confirms at another level of government says, yes, this is affordable to our criteria, and that's it. That's all. Bob's your uncle for ACLP.
That's interesting. Thank you for clarifying that.
Yeah, it's for ACLP.
Not AHF.
This is not HF. This is why I wanted to come here. There are different criteria for different programs. So what you just mentioned, Ellis, is for the ACLP program because they have that flexibility.
Go ahead, Kate, with your
Thank you.
secondary.
Thank you. Or primary, actually. So, and I want to recognize this is, there's a small pool for a large country, and that there are larger urban centers that have deep, dire need. And the conditions are worsening. So I understand how difficult this must be. And I'm sure many, many, many communities are wanting to have a very similar conversation. I do want to just point out we've got an extraordinary situation here where all of our agencies are working together and concerned about this. And we've got our social services staff members in the room. And a brief just chat with them involved sort of the topic of the federal government, the change in government, where we might be going now. And I think we're all probably watching that very closely to see what happens in the housing space. And I'm wondering if you're hearing anything yet, where your hope meter is, if there's any information coming through to you yet, even if there's unconfirmed sort of preliminary sort of queries, if there's anything that can provide us with a little bit of clarity or not clarity at this time, but understanding of maybe timelines when we might hear housing funding announcements. I think we're all aware of what the government's platform was during the election period. Are you seeing anything coming forward or any ideas when we might be getting some concrete illustrations of what we can hope for?
So I know as much as you know, obviously.
Okay.
Obviously, we're hopeful that housing remains a key priority and that, we're efficient in how we do things, where things just continue if it works well. However, what we do know is what we have authority Policy Authority and Financial Authority to provide, which are these two programs up until its end date, right? So the Affordable Housing Fund is sunsetting in 2027, and it is very popular right now. So it's very challenging right now to prioritize across all the projects, and that's just the reality of what we're facing right now. ACLP has longer runway. It goes on to 2031, so we've got a bit more runway on that one. We know publicly that it was announced that a federal budget will be tabled in the fall. We are hopeful that there will be information there that will help us. Until then, all I can say to everybody is make your needs known. You know, voice what you need. Voice what's important to you.
Should we be doing that with the support of our federal representative, and should we be doing that?
I mean, if they're seeking feedback, I would provide you feedback. I'm not, you know, we're also at the same time gathering feedback on our side as it relates to our own programs, hence, you know, the updates that we did in November, which reflected, you know, the dual scorecards, splitting out the affordability, depth and breadth. Like, we're always seeking feedback. And as I mentioned, you know, we do want to do more rural projects, which is why I'm here today, and which is why I'm happy to follow up with your specific projects to see if there's something we can do within our policy authorities, right? I can't go higher or, you know, different than what I'm told to do, but that's, yeah.
I think one of the things that Adam brought up was really, I think I would consider that feedback, which is when you're looking at rural communities, they don't have the cash flow to be looking at investing in a lot of preliminary studies if the project's never going to go anywhere. We just don't have that cash flow. So looking to eliminate anything that requires us to put money into consultants when we should be putting it into housing, I think is a process streamline approach that would help us immeasurably, and probably all communities.
Yeah, I know. I mean, from a Class B perspective, we could look at fixed price contracts as an option, right? So that's another thing, but we'll have to look at fixed price contracts for both soft costs and hard costs, just to make sure that there's certainty in the costs that are being proposed in the pro forma. It's like, there's ways that we can find, at the end of the day, we want to make sure we have the right numbers that we can rely upon for a loan agreement, because we can't change that, right? So that's our risk. So if we can't commit more money than is needed, right? And you don't want to get less money than you need. So we need to make sure once we sign the dotted line, that loan agreement, it's said and done. That's a contractual obligation on both of us, right? So that's why we ask for a lot of these documentation, because over the years in the past, where we've seen some flex, we've had issues, right? Where projects are in difficulties, proponents are coming to us and needing us to bail them out, and there's different situations, and I've seen that side of the business, which is not fun. You know, we definitely want to help, but it's hard, you know, when we don't have that certainty up front. Hence, getting some of these, you know, requirements. It's kind of important, but definitely depending, like I mentioned, there could be specific things that's unique to a specific project, a specific municipality, and I've been in those conversations where let's logically work through this and figure out how we can make it work based on what we actually need and what you need. Yeah. And
accountability is important, 100%. It's just ensuring that it's not putting poorer areas, areas with a smaller tax base, areas with less access to any sort of internal housing funding that comes from the levy, or that comes from proceeds that much larger municipalities might have, ensuring that is not a red tape barrier for smaller municipalities, I think, in any way is excellent.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Adam?
Just following this conversation, and it's a good one. I see the gap between a proponent like us or a private sector really trying to prepare that initial viability and sort of risk assessment of a project, and getting to the point where CMHC, you know, is able to do the same for any given project. And it leads me to believe that maybe perhaps the seed funding program could be maybe reviewed and maybe phased or tiered, so that you know, funding could be provided for an initial viability stage, and if it passes that threshold, a defined criteria, then it could move move into a second, program where we can get some seed funding for detailed design and some of the engineering, because, I mean, we can't even think about different types of contractual scenarios until we move into the design process. And that's where we're stuck. I can't recommend to these folks to move into a detailed design phase because it doesn't look at this stage, at the very early stages of an initial pro forma, that project will be viable. So I can't recommend we spend money that we don't have early in the process. So perhaps that is a bit of a takeaway that, the seed funding was, we did appreciate that on both of our projects. It only goes so far, and for the smaller projects, it's proportionally less, even though that project is still a $6 million small apartment building. And that's the other issue here, is that our construction costs are considerably higher potentially than other municipalities that are closer to larger centers and transportation corridors and these sorts of things. So we're at a double disadvantage down here because of that as well. So right now our pro forma doesn't work at all with the AHF program, and even with the seed funding and that sort of thing. So again, just a suggestion that perhaps that could be reviewed on your end, and just to help smaller organizations get to move along the stage, but not move ahead if the project truly doesn't have the viability that would be required to move it ahead.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Crystal.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question, maybe a couple, depending on where the line goes, but about the methodology for the rental market survey that you spoke to.
Methodology, yes.
Yes, and I'm curious specifically about one item. You talk about that your survey targets with at least 3 rental units, and then also includes it needs to have been on the market for at least 3 months. I was wondering if you could maybe provide some rationale as to why that is. I'm just thinking, like, for especially an area like here, nothing stays on the market for any amount of time, so you're not going to see it. Like, it's transferring over. People already have someone filling it before they're even
That's
out.
not what that means. I apologize.
Okay.
And I know the way it's written makes it look like it's available for 3 months. That's not what it means. It means it's not new units. So it has to have been occupied, right? So we're not looking, because we have stock that's brand new, it's listed, but no one's ever lived in it. That's not comparable to us, right? So we're looking at units that have been occupied. That's all it means. Yeah.
That's perfect. And one follow-up, with respect to this methodology, have you heard any feedback from anyone else, any other municipalities, or anyone looking at using this sort of information in terms of other people's comments on how this is done from CMHC? And if so, or if not, how often do you look at reviewing or maybe changing this methodology? Like, is there a process that municipalities can feed into specifically for this in terms of shaping it so that it's maybe better for rural areas? Because even this with at least 3 rental units, it does apply in some cases, but not as much as maybe urban areas. We have a lot of people live in the rural areas because they're not wanting to be on the same properties, like they're more secondary rental units, like houses that are being repurposed, and that's not going to get caught by your data potentially if it has to be at least 3 rental units. So I'm just curious, how often do you review that, if it's coming up, and how would we feed into that process?
It's an interesting question. I do know in the past we have done, I think it's a different market study. So this is one market study for rental market survey. We do have another market study, just a housing market study, that looks at like condos, for example, as that's a 1 unit project, right? Or townhouses or single family homes. This one in particular is akin to our rental programs, which requires a minimum of 5 units for the project, right? So we don't consider, for ACLP and AHF, we do not consider projects less than 5 units. Therefore, that's why we look at the RMR, the rental market survey, because we're looking at similar type structures. So we wouldn't allow like a 1 unit property as a comparable for an ACLP or an AHF project, because the minimum requirement is 5 units, right? It's a different building when you have a house versus an apartment building.
Go ahead, you've got a follow-up. Yeah.
Curious in terms of, so, because when we're looking for any rent, like our people who are looking for rentals aren't going to be picky whether if they need to move for somewhere, like the bedroom unit would be similar. I guess I'm just wondering how the logic behind only comparing the 5, like, because the project you can only do 5 units, it's not necessarily not comparable to look at just other units that are standalone. The rents are comparable potentially, just for the areas that they're
So when we look at,
makes
and this is one where I would defer to an appraisal report that uses their methodologies, right, or market feasibility study as it relates to the market demands. So when we're looking at our data, just, you know, numbers on a paper, we're trying to compare like to like, so a house to a house, a building to a building, right? So that's how we assess it. Now, if you feel it's different, we definitely are open to having that discussion as to why it's different and what substantiates it, and we'll have that conversation. Again, like I mentioned, like I've read other market feasibility studies that have different types of, you know, assumptions and assessments and drivers as to why a specific rent is, you know, feasible in a specific area. Absolutely. Yeah.
Fine, if I could keep going.
Sure, go ahead, yeah.
So that is very helpful information, thank you. And just curious, I work in the realm as well of studies and making sure we have certain also consistent people producing those. Have you seen those market studies coming in? Have they been done by staff of locations, or are they all consultants that are within that field? Like, how much flexibility, if we could put something together internally for it, will that have the same weight as something coming from something we're spending money on?
Yeah, I mean, that's, if you have your own, and I've seen that too, like your own data of actual tenanted units, that's something we will consider, yes. Yeah, absolutely.
Ellis, go ahead.
I was just going to make a more of an editorial comment than anything, just particularly for rural communities. If you look at Prince Edward County, we're 27,000 people, 11,000 dwellings, 75% of people live rurally, and there's maybe 20 apartment buildings. So being able to compare apples to apples for the purposes, so I mean, that's, I guess, in our case, you know, then we would want to have that conversation so that we can make those comparisons and provide the data and so on. But it's a huge rural problem because even where the apartments are located, if you want to do apples to apples, is not the same in terms of community impact as opposed to an urban environment.
Exactly, yeah. And we've seen projects where it's like, you know, 10 cottages on a piece of land, and that's their rental, right? Like, it's single cottages. See what I mean? Like, it's like I said, everything is unique. Like, what are you looking to build? How are you looking to market it? Like, who are you tenanting it to? And then what's the comparable to that? That's why we've seen multiple different types of, you know, property structures. And then at that point, we would consider what would be comparable to that. Absolutely, yeah, yeah.
Thank you for that, Ellis. I'm going to kind of go off script a little here, and while the mayor is not a member of this committee, I think it's important to recognize he's here and ask him if he has any questions from his position, also as vice chair of the Eastern Ontario Wardens Caucus, because I know there's been discussions at the OWC about this topic.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Thanks very much for the presentation. I'm sorry I didn't introduce myself earlier. It's an interesting discussion, and I think you can understand the particular situation we are in Prince Edward County, which I dare say is unique just by virtue of the type of community we are. We're island community, and we're adjacent to Belleville and Quinte West. And you know, I appreciate the work that you guys are doing. But a couple of things struck me during this conversation. One, that this is, it's kind of a one-size-fits-all situation in terms of how the funding's available. And I appreciate your comments that, you know, come and talk to us, and we'll see what we can do. And I hope you go back with the understanding that those conversations really should take place. But a couple of things struck me from comments that some of the members made. Kate talked about people moving away and having to go to work, and this has a pretty significant effect on, or could have, well, it does have an effect on the economy because people have to leave and maybe they come back for their work, but sooner or later they decide, well, I'm not going to work there anymore. I'm just going to migrate out permanently. And that's something we want to prevent. One of council's key priorities, I think number one priority, it's fair to say, is housing and housing availability. We want to be able to provide a place for anybody who wants to live in Prince Edward County that opportunity. So we are doing everything in our power to make that happen. We created the Affordable Housing Corporation, and we have a number of projects that are at various stages that Adam talked about. But we, you know, Adam talked about the threshold for funding. Well, we don't have that dough. And so I'm appreciative of, you know, those conversations maybe moving forward and look at how you can help us deal with the problem we have to deal with. But it's sobering, and it very much is a problem we are doing everything we can to address. And I dare say we're very passionate about it. The EOWC, the organization I'm involved with, and we've got one member who has joined us today. This is generally smaller communities, and all of them, I dare say, have exactly the same problem. Not to the same degree, but the same problem. So I'll leave it at that, but I do appreciate that you're open for discussion about our particular concern, because we're pretty driven to start seeing results, and we have various projects we've talked about, and they have been stymied for any number of reasons, which then becomes a reflection on council not doing, or the Affordable Housing Corporation not doing anything to move the projects forward. And we have to eliminate those problems. So I think it's fair to say you'll likely be hearing from
I expect it.
one
Yes.
or all of us via a bus trip or something. So thank you very much for the
It's a freaking
presentation.
flyer miles coming here. No, absolutely. And I understand that, and that's what I mean by, let's talk about the file that you have, the project that you've got underway, and then we can figure out what it looks like, what makes sense. Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. I'm just going to go back over to my right and continue asking if anybody else has any questions.
Does Eve have anything online? Would he? I don't know.
Our format isn't to open the
Okay.
floor to questions from everybody.
Okay.
It's meant to be a conversation between our corporation board and yourself. And there is an opportunity on the agenda for comments from the audience, and I am absolutely going to ask those that have joined us virtually, if they do have any questions, to bring them forward.
Okay.
And hopefully, I'm hoping that I will give you the opportunity after the comments for the audience to respond to those. Again, trying to keep this as more of an open conversation without the meeting getting out of hand, let's say, or going in multiple different directions. So Brad?
Just a point of order though, I don't have a mic.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. Just a point of order, though. We can waive the procedural bylaw to include them in the conversation.
I want to keep the meeting in control at this point, in order, sorry, not in control. So I've suggested that comments from the audience are more than welcome, and I would like to maintain that agenda order.
So when commenters do come forward, comments from the audience, is it possible to just relax the reins a little and let questions and answers, if necessary, be undertaken in a more natural sort of question and answer way rather than just receiving comments?
I think I just said that that after the comments from the audience, that I would ask Annie to respond to those.
Oh, I meant directly.
I will ask Annie to respond to the questions afterwards. Councillor Nyman, did you have any other questions that you wish to ask?
No, I'm good.
Okay. I know I have a few, but I'm trying to give everybody else the opportunity to speak first. So, Councillor McNaughton, if you have any further questions? Yeah, okay.
So, yes, so I'm still just sort of concerned with our next steps as a rural area, how we can initiate those discussions. We've made many overtures and provided quite a lot of data and said we think our data is strong, and here's why. And the CMHC has received that information on numerous occasions. And so I'm wondering how we best facilitate that next step in a conversation about specific projects. We're sort of talking about more the generals at this meeting, the general ideation and the programs, but just more specifically, what can we do next to really try to initiate those more nuanced conversations that you've been talking about that I think we'd really be interested in?
Absolutely. It's a good question. So my intended next step would be to touch base with Ellis and Adam probably and walk through your pipeline, what you've got, and literally just sit down and go through all the performance you've got, walk through the projects, and then figure out what's going on. Like I can't, talk generally right now. I'd have to see the projects itself and find out what the gaps are and figure it out. So that would be my logical next step, is to get into the projects directly.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Crystal? You have nothing further? I'm sensitive to the mics. The volume tends to go up when there's one less mic on, so I've been shutting mine off so that everybody else can be heard better. So I know it's not specific to what you've been talking about, what we have been talking about here, but certainly, and I'm sure you're well aware of the HAF funds that were all over the news. And were certainly a big topic of conversation, not just here, but right across Canada, and distribution and non-distribution. One of the big questions, and this, I just came across this recently, as recently as last night, I kind of said to myself, where is that at? Where is that fund at? How much is left over? How much is not being taken up by certain communities? How many projects have been denied? And I came across some interesting numbers, particularly in the case of, I can get back to it, the case of Oakville, who was approved for $25 million. And they chose not to meet the criteria, so therefore they actually had to give back 1.3 million of the initial funding. And their programs and funding were denied by CMHC through the HAF, $25 million. So it was rather difficult to try and find other examples across the country, and given that it's a $4.4 billion fund, what's happening with that money? How much is left in the pool? And will there be a reallocation that better targets rural municipalities who were severely disadvantaged under that program?
Yeah, good question.
Several questions there, sorry.
Good question. So full disclosure, I don't oversee the HAF program. That's a different team altogether, and I can definitely reach out for further clarification. I can share with you my knowledge, and that's as far as I can go. My understanding is that the HAF allocation has is fully committed because they had a second round in September, right? Mm-hmm. So that was a round 2 for whatever was left in the bucket. And January, the team communicated to all the municipalities that applied and whether or not they were successful or not. So all the communications have gone out. What's important to note with the HAF funding is not necessarily directly tied to affordable units like the AHF program is. AHF is directly, we've got targets for number of affordable units. So the way that the HAF program works is helping with the administrative side of things, right? So helping municipalities to whatever infrastructure you need, or whatever, data and technology you need, whatever process improvements, staffing, all sorts, like whatever it is. So that's a hard program to quantify because every HAF application had its own business proposal for how they're going to use the funds. See what I mean? So it's not one where I can slice and dice an Excel spreadsheet and say this is how much money was going to this and that and that and that. As a bonus, though, municipalities got extra dollars if they also included affordable units. And so that's where you've seen some municipalities sending money direct from HAF out to projects. Other municipalities use it as DC waivers or tax exemption waivers, other ways to enable that. Again, it's hard, like I said, to slice and dice and give you an exact number. So with that said, I don't have the current status in terms of where the projects, like the funding commitments to funding, utilization is. I think that's what you're asking, right? Like of the $4 billion, how much of it is actually like dispersed, right? I don't have that number. I can try to get it for you from the HAF team. And so, yeah, in short, like I can't, it's not an easy answer to provide because it's not an easy program. It's not a standard program at all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, then who in the CMHC should we be talking to about to try to get those answers for? Because I'm sure I can come up with 10 more questions.
Yeah, I'll
with regards to, and this is, and by the way, we did apply twice.
Okay.
We denied the first time and then of course denied a second time. Okay. So yeah, I would really like to know who we should be talking to there because like I say, if I was it was very easy for me to find the fact that $25 million went back in. And I can tell you that would go a long way to any rural municipality to addressing everything from directly funding affordable housing to infrastructure enabling housing. So there's, anyways, just from my perspective, I look at it and go, okay, a federal government program that's massive. There's always money left over. How do you get your hands on it?
Yeah.
That's my underlying question. How do we reach out and say, hey, we have social housing needs. I forget what the total number is. Councillor Nyman's actually on our Appellis team. And, there's a huge waiting list there. We have massive needs in the mixed market area. We have infrastructure needs in order to be able to meet our housing goals. And that's generally where, I think that's a good use of those funds. But for now, I think it would be really helpful if we could know who to speak to, because I think, from my perspective, I think there's another conversation to be had to help all of us, including our neighbors in the EOWC, to find ways to improve housing in general. And that fund in itself, if it is going to languish with tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars over the next 5 years. Right. It's got to be a better way. Now, I know I'm going to be advocating with our new local MP, and I'm hoping that we can get in front of somebody on the political side, but on the administrative side, I think that's just as important, if not more.
Absolutely.
So if you could help us with directing us in the right direction, I'd be very, very happy with that.
Absolutely. Yep.
Go ahead, Brad.
So we have staff from Appellis here who probably give us the number for the wait list for the housing. Do you have that, Scott? You got that number? How long a wait it is?
Oh, how long a wait? Yes. Sorry, is this a microphone here? Or okay.
Just
sure. Let's.
Hi, I'm Scott Robertson, a manager at Prince Edward Lennox and Addington Social Services. I can't tell you what they are right now because they change every day, but we have about a little over 600 households on our waiting list right now, and the waiting list ranges from about 4 or 5 years for a family for like a 3-4 bedroom, a little longer for a 2-bedroom, and about 8 years for a 1-bedroom. Somebody's on the waiting list. With our constant curiosity, what are people doing while they're on our waiting list? We hear about it, and yeah, it's not always good. So yes, thank you.
All right, no, that's great. That's good information, I think, for Annie to take back. Your mic's back on, Brett. You were off, now you're on. Okay. Where am I going? So I think I'll hold off because I know we do have a closed session, and I got a couple of questions that may be more appropriate in closed. So, okay. I'm going to ask one more time if anyone else on the committee has any further questions. And now I'm staff. Adam Morales, was there any commentary or question that you may have that's specific to what was presented to us?
Nothing further, Mr. Chair, than the conversation, which I appreciated, and so thanks again for coming to speak with us. I just wanted to commit to the board that we will work on the pro forma under the other program, and we'll certainly transmit both, and we'll really carry those conversations through as quickly as we can. I mean, obviously the board wants to move rapidly on both projects, but specifically the Disraeli project has been the board's priority, and it is unable to proceed until we figure out how to make it work. So staff will take that away and work with CMHC, hopefully on a rapid timeline, and then we'll be prepared to come back and relay to the board our progress.
Okay, perfect. And yeah, I neglected to mention that we are. It's not just about our issues. You know, I touched on the social services programs and the housing that's required there, but to my knowledge, there are I'll say 3 private enterprises that at least 3. One of them being the Love Song program in Bloomfield. We also have a recently council-approved Nicholas Street project, which is a 50% affordable apartment. We have Queen Elizabeth School project, and to my knowledge, there's at least one other totally private enterprise that could be looking for answers to assist with, and I guess I would be through the ACLP program. But I think a lot of the information you provided for us is likely going to be very helpful for all of these organizations. So it's not just about us here at the corporation, it's certainly about all of these things. There's a lot of irons in the fire out there, and those fires are kind of getting damped on. So go ahead.
Just one more comment to say that we need to make sure that the CMHC and those developers are also understand that we are able to use the 9-point because that was a pain point that came from one of our players, or more than one of our players, that they were unaware that we could use Belleville in the pull down on the pro forma. So we're going to have to make sure, someone's going to have to make sure that word gets out to them, because their funding applications are imminent, and that will help that greatly.
And I would recommend it before they press submit on the application to reach out to myself or someone on my team, and just come to me first, and then we'll make sure we'll double check before they submit that everything is good to go. Like, they can still upload everything and put it in draft. We can still go in and we can pull all the documentation and take a look at it. But then we can have that conversation. To your point, we can flag that, right? So if they didn't catch that, we can flag that, and anything else that might be, different.
No, I appreciate that. The one I'm thinking of, developer, is actually MLI, what do they call the preferred? They're the large builder. So that's again why I'm a little surprised they were unaware, because they are a large player outside of this area. So, but we'll flag that, and then they can follow up with you on that.
Okay.
Okay, so thank you very much, Annie. Very, very, it's a large file, I know, and lots of information here. I know there were several things that I learned that were very helpful for me, which of course led me to doing some more homework as late last night. That's why I knew your email came in at 11:59. So I think next on the agenda is comments from the audience. So what I need is a motion.
Sorry. Yeah, Mr. Chair, we do. Yeah, a motion to receive, please.
Yeah. So I need a mover and seconder, Councillor McNaughton, and Member Landstra?
Thank you. So, motion that the presentation by Anny Lee, Senior Manager, Client Relations, Multi-Unit Housing Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation regarding CMHC programs for multi-unit residential rental properties be received.
Okay, all in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Okay, so next on the agenda is 6.1, and we do have a, who have I got here? Jason and Eve online, and we have two representatives of PELUS, Prince Edward Lennox and Addington Social Services, here in the room. So comments from the audience, I have none registered, but so I will open up the floor to questions from the audience. If anyone wishes to, yes. Okay. I'll go in order and ask everybody. So for right now, we'll start in the room and then we'll come to the online.
Okay, I'm Scott Robertson, manager at Prince Edward Lennox Addington Social Services. And I just have one comment, and that's to Annie, and thank you very much for coming here. And I've learned a lot about the application process, and I think people here have. I represent Prince Edward and Lennox and Addington, so I'll be in touch with you about Lennox and Addington. Mr. Chair, you stole my other comment. I was going to say it doesn't just impact the developments that this group is thinking of, but the private folks as well, some of whom I've been dealing with. So you took that part, so that's my only comment. Thank you very much.
Okay. Nothing from Elaine? Okay. So we have, I'm having difficulty reading the names. Mr. Clerk, could you read the names out for me? My eyes aren't that good.
We have Eve LaViolette, and I see Jason Gillison, I'm sorry.
Okay. All right. Eve, I saw you had your hand up.
I'm all good there. Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, I want to thank you for the excellent report. And I guess most of the questions and answers were done. So I want to thank you for listening to me there. So next time, maybe we'll have some more questions at the time. Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Eve, what municipality are you with?
I'm with Alfred and Plantagenet Township, but I'm Prescott and Russell. I'm the warden of Prescott and Russell. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Eve. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Jason, did you have any questions or comments that you wish to express to the committee and maybe more importantly, Annie?
Well, no, first off, thank you for the invitation, and there's a lot of valuable information here. I think my questions were answered already. Our main concern was that we do have, I'm with Corth Lakes Housing. Our main concern was the AHF funding, because one of our proposals was placed on hold. So I was kind of hoping for information on if it was going to be ever approved or what the situation was with that. But I guess that was already asked before. So I think I'm good. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Jason. Councillor McNaught.
Thank you, Jason. You're Corth Lakes Housing. I'm just wondering if a lot of the problems we've experienced, and we've talked about at this table today, resonate as you've got something of a similar composition for your municipality.
Yeah, it's always hard to build small projects. If we go big and we can manage to somehow get that funding, then we can, CMHC has been very helpful. But if we have a really small one in our kind of outlier communities, it gets more difficult to get that. So yeah, I feel like we're feeling the same pain points.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm not hearing any further questions, so we will, I guess I need a motion to receive the comments from the audience. Councillor Nyman and Crystal. that the comments from the audience be received? All in favor? That's carried. Okay. So the other, okay, 7.1 is basically a listing of all of the correspondence back and forth from our organization, from council through the mayor's office. And are there any questions? I guess I need a motion on the floor first. So a mover and seconder for 7.1, Councillor McNaughton, Councillor Nyman.
Thank you, McNaughton. Nyman. Motion that the correspondence between the Prince Edward County Affordable Housing Corporation Board and Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation regarding funding policies and criteria be received for information.
Okay. Were there any comments or questions regarding all of that correspondence? I know we've all had it for a considerable amount of time, and a lot of the questions today, I think, were based on that correspondence. Okay, so I'm seeing none, so I'll call the motion. All in favor? That's carried. And item 8.1, so we will be recessing the open session and going into a closed session. And at this point, could I have a mover and seconder to go into closed? Please read the motion.
Mr. Chair, would you like to call a brief recess first, or?
Yes, I suppose we should do that, and then we'll call
And
the
then-
motion.
and then-
Okay, I'm sorry, wasn't sure which way you wanted to do that.
If that's okay.
So we'll call a brief recess for 10 minutes, and maybe, if that gives maybe our guests in the room an opportunity to speak directly to Annie, we'll do that. So yes, we'll call a recess for 10 minutes. So. Call the meeting back to order. Okay, so agenda item 8.1. So I need a mover and seconder to take us into closed. Councillor Nyman, Councillor McNaughton, if you could read that, please, Brad.
Nyman McNaughton, motion that the Affordable Housing Corporation now move into closed session to consider information explicitly supplied in confidence to the municipality or local board by Canada, a province or territory, or a crown agency of any of them, Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation update pursuant to section 239(2)H of the Municipal Act.
All in favor? That carries. Okay. So we're now.
Moment, Mr. Chair. Let me
Yes.
just.
While you disconnect. Thank you, Mr. Clerk. To let everybody know, there were no motions to come out of the closed session, so therefore we are just moving simply to adjourn. So if I could have a mover and seconder, Councillor Nyman, Councillor McNaughton, to adjourn at 12:49 p.m. All in favor? That's carried. We are adjourned.